When you're first learning to skydive, you're taught that you've got two parachutes. You've got your main and your reserve parachute. But how often do you really think about that parachute that you hope you're never going to have to use? So now you might think that your reserve parachute is just this mysterious piece of equipment, but there's actually a lot of similarities between the main and the reserve parachute. This will make your reserve parachute familiar and easy to understand if you ever do need to use it. According to USPA statistics, most skydivers need to use their reserve parachute about every 700 to 800 jumps. So it's not a question of if, it's really a question of when. Today, my reserve parachute needed to be repacked. So let's go ahead and see what are some of those distinctions between your main and your reserve parachute. So let's just start with kind of the obvious. First, our toggles are red. They're still stowed in a half brake position. Reserve comes out, you'd still have to unstow them before you can fly your parachute. You can also see that this slider and majority of reserve sliders are going to have a hole in it so that they can come down quicker. And you can't see this from the video, but the material that the parachute is made out of is low porosity nylon, also known as F111 still. On the label here, you can see that there is a place for a rigger to mark off when the reserve parachute is used. Not all riggers mark this off, but as you can see, if you were to actually read here, that each reserve is good for about 20 years. This one says it's good for 25 jumps, so you actually had to use your reserve parachute, or 40 packs, and then it has to go back to get tested to make sure it's still airworthy. The other thing that we have here is, if you can see, it tells us what is the maximum deployment speed, as well as what is the max weight that this reserve parachute can support. Another difference that we have between main parachutes and reserve parachutes just has to do with the deployment bag. So as you can see here, this deployment bag for the reserve is completely free, and that's why it's called the free bag. So if you do not have a MARD on your reserve, typically you're having to go look for your free bag as well as your main after you cut away. What you'll typically find is that reserves are a single solid color. Most notably, they are either going to be white, light blue, yellow, or orange. So all reserve parachutes that I'm aware of are 7-cell parachutes, and that's just because they're going to open more quickly and stably that way. And just as a reminder, your reserve needs to be repacked every 180 days. Again, while statistics say that most skydivers are only going to have a reserve ride once every 700 to 800 jumps, it's still critical to understand how your gear works and the differences between the two types of parachutes. Now that you understand the differences between your reserve parachute and your main parachute, it's time to see how those two systems can work together. So if you haven't already, go ahead and check out this video about MARDs, or main assisted reserve deployment systems, as they're a critical piece of safety equipment in modern skydiving gear. So click the link and check it out. And if you haven't already, please make sure that you go ahead and give a like to this video and subscribe to our channel if you have not already.